Oh. I thought I had started and I started to talk and then it hadn't started. Here it is, the second week, and here I am again, as I will be for the rest of the term. In the first week of class, we discussed archetypes. We covered some of the theories about archetypes, and there's Jung's theory that they reside in our psyche and are the result of the same experiences that early humans had over and over again. On the other hand, the dispersion theory says that there was a central civilization, and they took those myths with them as they spread out. And then David Williams, I always forget his name, says that they are physiological. There might be other explanations for archetypes, and there was a video that I posted, a video PowerPoint that I posted about archetypes, and I hope that you looked at that, and of course you can always go back and look at it again. Now this week, we are going to apply the concept of archetypes to specific types of myth, and the types of myth that we are going to look at are creation myths and the myths of the afterlife. Now, I'm not going to go into this too deeply, and I did mention some aspects of creation and afterlife myths in the written announcement that is below this. And as I state there, no, I have not read or heard every creation or afterlife myth in the world, but every one that I have read or have heard have some of the same elements or aspects. And of course, the question goes back to why. There could be no doubt that these archetypes exist, but the question still remains, why do they exist? You have a journal entry on the differences, the similarities, and the functions of these myths. And so I don't want to say too much because I don't want to influence what it is that you are going to be writing, but I did give some hints. I will mention Yggdrasil, the world tree. And the reason why I want to say something about the world tree is in the modern world, we don't always understand the importance of trees to our ancestors. Trees bore fruit. They offered food. They were cut down and used for firewood. They offered shade. And so the tree was more than just something that you saw in the landscape, but it offered sustenance and protection. And Yggdrasil is probably the most best known, I should say, world tree in mythology. And of course, Yggdrasil is the tree in Norse myth. And it connects the three levels of the Norse cosmos. And it's later. I wanted to say Johnny come lately, but that's a cliche, and I try to avoid cliches. It comes later in myth. It comes after Greek myth, after Sumerian myth, after Egyptian myth. But each of those cultures also had types of world tree. And in Judaism, there is a world tree as well, but it serves a different function than does Yggdrasil. The world tree in Judaic myth is, of course, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that was in the Garden of Eden, from which Adam and Eve ate. You'll find the world tree in other cultures as well. Not all cultures have a world tree. There is also the cosmic egg. And the cosmic egg is the big egg. It has to be a big egg from which the universe is hatched. And we find this in African myth, in Greek myth. Darkness laid a silver egg, Erebus, I think it was, laid a silver egg in the womb of darkness. And that was the moon. But it's still a cosmic egg. And also Eurynomé, who is a precursor to Greek myth, she also, she laid, in essence, the cosmic egg from which the universe came. Okay, I'm lapsing into babbling now because I start talking about these myths and one thing leads to another and I want to talk about more myths and more myths. I will say a few words about the afterlife. Every culture on the face of the earth has a creation myth, and every culture has a myth of the afterlife. And this began, or it didn't begin in Egypt and Sumeria, because there was no doubt that there was this concept of the afterlife before societies were literate. And in the beginning, afterlives were not really very nice places. Well, first of all, in Egypt, only the pharaoh could go into the afterlife at first. And then over a few centuries, his family could join him. And then after a few more centuries, anybody who could become embalmed could live in the afterlife. The idea of punishment and reward in the Egyptian afterlife came much later. And in the Egyptian afterlife, you just kept on doing what it was you're doing here on this earth. If you were a farmer, you stayed a farmer. If you were a pharaoh, you stayed a pharaoh. And later it did have the fields of Hetep, which were paradise, and they had places of punishment. They also had it wasn't a deity. I don't exactly know what you could call this creature, but its name was Amut or Amit, and it was part crocodile, part hippopotamus. And if souls were found unworthy, they were fed to Amut. And they just simply ceased to exist. They weren't punished, but they ceased into exist and went into oblivion. And to the Egyptians, oblivion was worse than being tortured. In Sumeria, we know about this from the Epic of Gilgamesh. And originally, their afterlife, Ker, was horrid. The souls of the dead crawled around on the ground, and as Enkidu tells Gilgamesh, they drink dust and they eat dirt. Not a good place to be. In later editions of Gilgamesh, especially into Babylon, some people were rewarded and some people were punished, but it seemed rather arbitrary. For example, if a woman had not had children, she was cursed in the underworld, and she sat on a corner like an empty vessel. And to us, that seems very unfair, but to them, having children was extremely important, and men who had lots of children sat at tables and feasted. On the other hand, the man who was eaten by the lion in real life continued to experience being eaten by the lion in the afterworld. And the man who fell off the roof, he was still experiencing falling off the roof. So again, to us, it seems rather arbitrary. Okay, I am definitely going to stop there. And again, there is the written part below that covers the deliverables for the week. And the discussion is topic exploration. So be thinking about topics, because next week it's going to be sources and hypothesis. So we're moving on with it. If you have any questions, contact me, and I'll see you in the discussion.